There's a total of 10 chapters or 10 ways the text is divided. This one starts with Master Hui Neng, the Sixth Patriarch, in his own words, recorded by his disciples, telling about, you could say talking about his life, but he's talking about his spiritual life. He's talking about the path he cultivated and the circumstances and events that led up to him becoming the Sixth Patriarch, leaving his home, and so forth. So this is actually the beginning of the sutra proper. And what we'll do is we'll read through passages, look at them a little bit, talk about them. I should say at the outset, the sutra is not long. If you really look at it, it's just 100 and some pages, less than 150 probably in English. But it's very terse and it's very profound. So it's easy to rush by some of the ideas and insights and not really pause to digest them. And so I would recommend, as you do this, we do it together. We're not going to go too fast, hopefully not too slow, but at the same time, come back to this again and again. Reread the sections that we did last week on your own, and you'll see each time you read it, you'll pick up on something else. You'll pick up on something different. And I would say continue to do this if you so inclined for the upcoming years as well. I think you'll find that the depth of this text is just inexhaustible, and with your practice and cultivation, your own experience, you increase the kind of light that you shine on the text, and more facets of the text are revealed. And as more facets of the text are revealed, they reflect back on your own experience and understanding and cultivation. And so there's an unending reciprocity going on between you and the text in your own mind. And eventually, if you do it in a very straightforward and sincere way, you might easily have the experience of this text coming alive, and I say in quotation marks, coming alive in the sense that there's an underlying current of energy and insight here that is in the words, but under the words, and even behind the words, that can come out when you treat this with a very sincere attitude at the same time you're really cultivating. So the combination of those two, and you may find that even though in this life you feel you didn't have the opportunity to meet a good and wise advisor, approaching this particular text, I think, in that way will not disappoint you, and you might find that you do have one indeed in between these pages. So I really encourage you to not just take our evening reading here as the end point. So let's read a bit into this, and we'll go a little bit. Once, when the master arrived at Baolin, and that's in brackets, we translate jeweled wood, the prefect of Shao province, a gentleman named Wei, whose given name was Chu, along with other local officials, climbed the mountain to invite the master to come to the city so that he might give Dharma instruction to the people assembled in the lecture hall at the of Great Brahma Monastery, Da Fan Si. After the master was formally seated, the prefect, along with more than 30 other officials, more than 30 Confucian scholars, over 1,000 bhikshus, bhikshunis, Taoists, and laity, all together bowed to him and requested instructions on the essential of the Dharma. So here's, first of all, the setting. This is not his own words. This is still probably Fa Hai describing the context of his first teaching, his first Dharma assembly, which took place at this monastery, Da Fan Si. And it's early on. It's when he's really starting. The assembly that comes is not just Buddhist monks and nuns. We can see from this that for some reason either because of his reputation, which was beginning to grow, or because of affinities that he had with these particular individuals. It can work both ways. Sometimes you hear of it, or you hear of a teacher, or you hear of a text being lectured, and you're drawn near to do that, to study it, to learn. And you're not sure exactly why. There's something that draws you in. And so it's often what's happening with these assemblies is there is the obvious interest that someone might have who's coming from a cultural, spiritual tradition wanting to learn how to practice and develop wisdom. But there's also these less tangible affinities, or how shall I say it? Chinese, they use the word affinities, but it means a mutual attraction that's born of causes and conditions that aren't just of the intellect, but have to do with, and sometimes they say even past lives, where there's been meetings, encounters, connections. And so why anyone shows up at a particular given assembly at a particular time, like say tonight here in Berkeley, for the Sixth Patriarch Sutra, the causes and conditions of this are, many and probably inconceivable. And if you thought about it, you might think, well, I'm just here by chance, or, I was going to go to the football game, but parking was close here, so I walked in. But you also might find that it's the actual title of the text. It's really strange how this, and some people come in after they've had dreams. And they have a dream of the text or the teacher or the Sixth Patriarch or the monastery or something like that, and they just follow that inclination, and then here you are. So at this time, it's quite a big assembly. If you count up the numbers, over 1,000 monks and nuns and Taoists and laity, and then you have, so we're looking at probably 150, 30, almost 200 people probably gathered. The thing to point out here is that they bow to him, and he ascends formally seated, we put. And this means that this is not an informal talk. This is a formal gathering where he's being requested to really teach. And so usually what happens, he'll be seated on a higher seat than the assembly, sometimes called a dais, somewhat adorned, or sometimes it can be very plain, but it's usually an elevated seat up above the assembly. Now, every monastery will usually have one of these. For example, if it were going to occur here, the seat would be up here. And then that would be the dais. The teacher would formally come in his robes and probably bow himself in front, ascend to that dais, and then usually what would happen is somebody in the assembly representing the entire assembly would circumambulate respectfully 3 times the dais, and then bow 3 times in front, and then formally request the teaching. I, so-and-so, on behalf of everyone here, respectfully request the High Master to lecture on the essentials of the Dharma and so forth. And that's what's happening here. And that's why, if you notice, we go back to the very first page, the Sixth Patriarch's Dharma Jewel Platform Sutra. The platform is referring to this dais. So it's called a high seat or a dais. It's also a platform. And so the title of the sutra comes from the fact that he's giving this discourse that's being recorded in handwriting from this platform. Okay, so the master then says to the assembly, "Good and wise friends, Bodhi is just the purity of your own nature. Attend only to this and you will straightway achieve Buddhahood." Bang, first line. Now, there is no, sort of beating around the bush here. There's no sort of what we call kochi hua, sort of polite talk. Oh, it's nice to see you all. You all gathered and came today, and I hope you had a good vegetarian lunch. And so get yourself settled and make yourself comfortable. Maybe I'll start with a story. No. Hammer on steel. He says, "Good and wise friends." Now, what's interesting, he's addressing the assembly not as disciples, because they're really not. And he's not addressing them as students of the way. He addresses them in a formal term, good and wise friends. This reveals a lot about the nature of what he's doing. Formally, if you have an awakened teacher or a very spiritually advanced teacher, in Sanskrit they're called Kalyana Mitra. In Chinese it's Shanzhishir, and it means a spiritually wise and wholesome mentor. And what he's using the same phrase here to address the audience. Now this is really interesting because technically speaking, he's the good and wise advisor, right? And they're the dummies, or the devotees, the neophytes. But in his first address, he levels the whole ground here, and he just says, "Good and wise friends. We are all together, in a sense, good and wise friends, together cultivating the way. I don't presume to be superior to you. And you shouldn't assume yourself to be inferior to me." So right on his first line, he's making a very profound statement about the essential equality of this spiritual nature called Buddha, or the awakened nature. And he's saying in his first address, we all have it. And that's very, very profound. Later you'll see he does this again and again. He'll address the audience not only as good as wise friends, but he'll say, not only are you good and wise friends, but why don't you right now wake up? Now he didn't say, why don't you wake up after the lecture? He says, why don't you right now, as you're sitting there, realize that you are good and wise? Huh? So he's actually being very direct here, and this is why it's part of the direct teaching. So he says, good and wise friends. We are all of us mutually advising each other. He's also referring to called the good and wise advisor within. So he's going to make a statement that each one of us has an enlightened mentor within our human capacity. Within is to just say within our reach, within the scope of our mind and consciousness and nature, that's available to us, that we can trust and rely on, and that we should take as a guide. Now, whether we've allowed that good and wise advisor within some voice, some space, to instruct and guide us is questionable. Nonetheless, it's there. He or she is there. And part of the cultivation practice is to be able to clear away enough space in one's awareness to be able to hear, see, listen to, respond to, and begin a path of instruction guided by the good, wise advisor within. So you were going to ask a question.
Yeah, I was just thinking, could we take it even one step further? Because you're talking about him making statements and equalizing their, worldly sort of positions. But is it also just his Buddha nature talking to their Buddha nature? Just cut past the externals and see who can hear him at that level by referring to them in that manner?
Cutting past the distinction, you're saying?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, as we get into it, you're going to see one of the key concepts of this text, and the implications are just boundless. We're just probably scratch the surface, is non-duality. What he calls bu-ar, not two. And non-duality means exactly right in his first line, we are not two, we are one. And you'll see as the text go on, we get to the next page when he goes to see the fifth patriarch. The fifth patriarch then questions him and says, who are you? And we'll see in his answer a confirmation of your question, which is this distinction that's playing out here is not a real distinction. All distinctions are false distinctions at this level. So between an ordinary person and a sage, between an illiterate person and an erudite person, between someone who's from China or someone's from America or someone's from any place else, at the ground level, of the mind ground level, there is no difference whatsoever. None whatsoever. And so when he says good and wise advisors, all of this is implied there. Yeah. So he says Bodhi, the Sanskrit word, puti in Chinese, the awakening, enlightenment, which I don't want to use and we don't use in this text. Rather, awakening is just the purity of your own nature. Wow. So, if the goal is to have, and people want to have, the profound awakening, to replicate the awakening experience of the Buddha, which we call Bodhi, he is locating this right within our own nature, right within our own being. So his first line really establishes this awakening. And of course, by implication, they're asking for the essentials of Dharma. The essentials of Dharma are meant to show and to describe and articulate what Bodhi is and how you do it. And so right away he says, the essentials of Dharma is just your own nature. It's right there. It's in your own nature. Everything you need to know is in that essential nature that you have. And then his next line is, attend only to this, and you will straightway attain Buddhahood. I was jokingly saying last week, but it's somewhat true. This is the text. You could stop here. Everything that follows in the text from here on is going to be an elaboration, an explanation, a teasing out of the implication of these first two lines. Non-duality is here, because Bodhi is just your own nature. The purity is here, meaning that purity is essential and intrinsic, although you may not be completely in its fullness at this point. And how do you get to its fullness? How do you get to the line, wow, Bodhi is just my own nature. Hooray! But the next question would be, it doesn't feel like that yet. So his next line is the instruction. And he says, just attend to this, and you will straightway attain to Buddhahood. So the question is, my students always ask, well, yeah, attend to what? What is implied here that you're supposed to attend to? Your own nature. Not outside. So when he says, do not seek outside, he's reaffirming that the ground for this discovery, the ground for this potential, is within each and every person. So attend to this, attend to yourself. Cultivation. What does attend mean?
Keep your eye on it.
Yeah, keep your eye on it, keep your ear on it, keep your nose on it, keep everything on it, keep your eyes on this prize, so to speak. But attending to this means, and now we get into what he will elaborate, what does it mean then to cultivate? What does it mean to be mindful? What does it mean even to meditate? And what are all the practices for? It's only devices to get you to attend to this, attend to this, attend to this. So as soon as you leave this, you've stopped attending to it. It's like, whoa. So it's not like he didn't say believe in this. He didn't say believe in this. Believe this and you'll straightaway attain Buddhahood. And everybody going, I believe, but I'm still not a Buddha. No, he's saying attend to this. So you're getting here, his message is dynamic, not static. He is not asking you just to believe or think about something. He's asking you to attend to something, and that means you be somebody. You be in a different way. You are actually doing something here by attending to this. Wow. That's pretty interesting. So he's putting the emphasis on saying it's immediate, it's accessible, it's right within you, and you have to attend to it yourself. So there's a verse my teacher used to give. I could see now, inspired by this. It goes like this, as a guide to cultivation. Walking, standing, sitting, lying down, meaning in sleep. So walking, standing, sitting, lying down, and all your four activities, attend to this. Walking, standing, sitting, lying down, attend to this. So that's the first line. Do not separate from this is another way to translate it. Do not leave this. So walking, standing, sitting, lying down, don't leave this. Attend to this. If you leave this is the third line. Now some of you know the verse, so you would know the fourth line. But those who don't know the verse, you want to guess?
Come back to it.
Return, come back to it. If you leave this, then, yeah, quickly come back to it. Huh? Yeah, well, you know it. I told you. If you know it, you're not supposed to say it. Only those who don't know it can say, this sounds like Lao Tzu. Those who know don't say, and those who say don't know. Well, in this case, walking, standing, sitting, lying, and down, do not separate from this. If you separate from this before your eyes, you'll go amiss, is the fourth line. In other words, there's nothing else to steer by except this, and attending to this. And there's nothing else to correct except attending to this. So this is the inner life of paying attention to this. He says, if you separate from this, you will go amiss. And the Sixth Patriarch say, and if you return to this, you're jung, you're centered again. So again, the thing that's being described here is not so much you attain this or you believe in this, but you do this and you do it constantly, walking, standing, sitting, lying down, thought after thought, relationship after relationship, encounter after encounter, moment to moment. And it's an ongoing, constant activity by attending to this. Okay? So this becomes very important because what he's moving along towards here is there is no attainment. There's no attainment. There's no getting Buddhahood, at which, the flowers rise up, the lights go on, and says, congratulations, you have achieved Buddhahood. And then you become bronzed and gilded, and you sit unmoving for kalpas as a Buddha. What he here is Buddha is something you be. Something is something you be. It's a being. It's a way of being. And it's a way of being that is constantly moving, active, engaged, and balancing. Walking, standing, sitting, lying down. You don't separate from this, then you're a Buddha. As soon as you separate from that, you're not a Buddha. It's just like, and in the example he gives, it's just like this. The hand can turn that fast. Okay? Some of you may know this in a different way. You might make a resolve that you're not going to get angry anymore. And in that resolve, you're a Buddha. And then the first encounter comes. A call from somebody, someone cuts you off in traffic, and then you're no longer a Buddha. And it's just like that. One of the lines they have, as soon as the butcher puts down the cleaver, he's a Buddha. It's another expression of this active, dynamic sense. What you do is who you are and what you are. It's not what you believe per se. Belief can guide, but it's in the actions and the doing that you attain the state of equanimity or balance. So it's actually not attainment, but attaining. It's a maintaining. So that's what he's expressing here. Okay.
Marty, it's effort. It requires effort.
It requires mindful effort.
Mm-hmm. It's a constant kind of reorientation.
However, and this is what's interesting about it, because this was a question somebody asked last week. Well, if everything's okay, you're essentially a Buddha, then, and there's nothing to do, because in doing you're actually adding a head on top of a head, so why would we do anything? Why effort? And the answer is, it requires effort because you're reversing, well, let's say, if you've already attained the state of balance, and it's effortlessness, it's called. And in Chinese, sometimes it's called wu wei, literally without doing, but it means without intentional, premeditated calculation action. It's natural, it's spontaneous, because now it's nowhere having to negotiate second and third thoughts. It's become your nature. Your nature, essential nature, has become your real nature, if you understand what I mean. So it's like, it's so much your nature, it's so natural at this point, that it's effortless, even though it seems like there's effort. But at the beginning, in the reversal, it does require some effort. And the only reason it requires the effort is because the habit energy, and that's what Hanshan was talking about last semester, the habit energy has moved us into patterns of behavior and reactions that in a sense are effortless, but they're not healthy. Yeah. They're maintaining themselves. And so to make this, when you say attend to this, all of a sudden you say, whoa, when I attend to this, when I say this, I feel this. When I think this, I can see this happening. When I do this, I get this reaction. I'm attending, I'm watching cause and effect in what I'm doing and realizing I don't want to do that. I need to attend, and so you start to reverse the process, which requires some effort at the beginning.
Yes.
But once it starts to both habituate, but also naturally reinforce itself because it feels so natural. It's not like it's an intellectual, I'm on the way, I'm doing the right thing, aren't I? No. It's even with the precepts themselves. The precepts are effort at the beginning, but once you start to cultivate it, internalize it to such a degree, it feels so natural. It's effortless. It's somewhat what Confucius meant when he said, when I was 15, I set my mind on the way. Everybody, I've used this expression before, and then he says at 30, I resolved my doubts. At 45, I stood firm. He's discussing this effort, life of effort he applied. But he said by the time I was 70, I could follow my heart's desires without overstepping propriety or without stepping off the path. And so what he meant was, what began as effort and resolve slowly, gradually became effortless and so natural that he could follow his heart's desires because the heart now was so rectified and right on that it never even... That's a kind of high level of maintaining.
Right.
And so, yes, it does require effort at the beginning. But like I said last night, using Taoyuan and Ming's poem, just depends how mucked up you let your garden get.
Yeah.
It's for me, my garden in my backyard doesn't even qualify as a jungle. It's worse. So I go down there and I sweat and labor for 3 hours, and I come up and I'm covered with burrs and stings and nettles and everything. I look down and say, I'm going to see the Garden of Paradise, and I look down and it still looks about the same. And it's because it's so thick and overgrown that even when I work 3 hours, it's negligible. Whereas my neighbor, bless her soul, who has a little more time, that's my excuse, to take care of her garden, she goes down, she spends a half an hour, and everything just looks sparkling, clean, and bright, because every sort of thing that comes up, she's out her back door as soon as there's a weed. As soon as something's overgrown, she's trimming and cultivating all the time. And so for her, if I said to her, boy, keeping up a garden in a yard is really hard, and she says, drinking your lemonade, it's no effort at all, it's really easy.
No, she's habituated.
So she's cultivating constantly. And so for her, it's effortless. For me, it's a little more struggle. Good and wise friends, listen. This is a story of how I came to realize the Dharma. So after that first line, this is really interesting. He just comes out and gives it to me. He says, okay, those of you who want to leave, go home now. You don't have to stay. You got it. Those of you who want to hear my story, well, hang around, and I'll elaborate a little more. My worthy father was a native of Fangyang. Now he's talking about his life, but he was banished to Xin province in Lingnan, where his status was reduced to a commoner. Unfortunately for me, my father died early, and as a result, my widowed mother and I relocated to Nanhai, where we were so miserably poor that I sold firewood in the marketplace for a living. So, we know that he came of some stature. His father was an official of some sort. He was banished. He doesn't say why he was banished. But I think in fairness, we should not conclude he was banished for a crime. This would be a mistake. Systems of justice are uneven all over the world. And often people are banished for political reasons, especially in this particular system. So if you don't, play up to somebody, if you don't accept bribes, you don't sort of grease the palm, so to speak, or whatever, if you're an honest official, your chances of survival in this system are very minimum. And that's why you see a lot of poetry written by officials who, rather than give up their integrity and virtue, chose to pull themselves out of government and live in secluded areas, and they write the best poems. Okay, the ones who stay in, we don't have any record of it, they just got fat, happy, and died. But the ones that left behind remarkable literature are the ones who said, I cannot serve an evil government. It's not unlike Martin Luther King, who said, if our laws are immoral, the only place for a moral person is in jail. It's the same sentiment. So let's not assume that his father was a bad guy, all right? Unfortunately, he said the father dies early, perhaps even as part of that banishment. We don't know. Because with banishment comes a a loss of status and a loss of social and economic wherewithal. And so that's why now he's lost his father, and he has just he and his mother, and he has to take care of his mother. And so what he does what he can only do as a commoner now, because he's not going to get a high position. He gathers firewood and sells it in the marketplace. Yes?
Was there any mention about whether, since his father was an officer, you would think that the mom would have been educated through some kind of...
Say that a little louder, because I can't.
I say if the father was an officer, even though he was abandoned, but do you think that the mother might have been educated and think that, she would have educated him on?
So the question is whether the father obviously had some education because of the testing exam system. You didn't get a placement in that status without going through, the equivalent of. We don't have an equivalent, I guess. In any event, so yes, whether his mother was literate or not, nothing here to indicate that. But clearly, if he had said, and through my mother I learned my first characters or something, but he doesn't make any mention of that. So there may be a chance that she wasn't. In any event, this cuts short his career possibilities. In other words, it's not a meritocracy per se. And so no matter how talented and gifted he might be, without access to education and some economic wherewithal to support that education, there's no place for him to go except to labor and gather firewood for a living. And this is tough. This isn't like you go down to the local gardener's shop and pick up some wood and come back home. You're having to go increasingly into denuded areas further and further away from the capital, because wood being a scarce thing, every time you cut, you have to go deeper into the woods. Some time ago when I was in Korea, I saw the difficulties of firewood gatherers. I talked to some of them, and they said with modernization, they have to hike for days to get near wood that they can gather, and they put them on these wood pallets, and they really pile it up, and it's a couple days walk back in. And each year, it gets scarcer and scarcer because so many people are grabbing up this firewood. So this is really backbreaking hard work. That's what he's doing. Later tonight, I was going to read a poem from a Buddhist nun, and in this case, she does have learning because she came from a family that had some status. They didn't lose it, and therefore she was schooled, but schooled here meant homeschooled. I don't mean, not homeschooled, but schooled at home. In other words, a tutor was hired that privately came to the house and instructed her. And so she's able, unlike Hui Neng, to write wonderful poetry, and I hope to read one tonight. I was going to read some poetry on and off these classes. I found this really good collection from some Buddhist nuns who wrote some poetry, so I do that. Anyhow, and I like poetry. So. Okay, so he sold firewood. Once a customer bought firewood and had me deliver it to the inn, his inn, where he took the wood and he paid me. On my way out the gate of the inn, I noticed someone reciting a sutra. And as soon as I heard the words of the sutra, my mind immediately awakened. Now, there's a footnote here kind of giving you a heads up that this is from the Diamond Sutra, the Vajra Sutra. And it's the line that he heard because he says later, this was the line, and it's, let your mind be unattached, clinging to nothing. Okay? Ying wu shou ju, er cheng qi xin, right? And so he hears this line, and he has an awakening. Next page, he says, then he asked the person what sutra he was reciting. He said, the Diamond Sutra. I then asked him, where are you from? Where did you get this sutra? He said, I come from Eastern Chan, Dongchang, monastery in Qi province, Huangmei County. There, the fifth patriarch, the Great Master Hui Neng, resides and teaches over 1,000 disciples. I went there, bowed in respect, and encountered this sutra. The Great Master, meaning Hui Neng, constantly exhorts both Sangha and laity to simply cultivate according to the Diamond Sutra, so they by themselves see their essential nature and directly realize Buddhahood. Okay, pause. So, this is called the turning. And in the poems I'll read to you too, these biographies and autobiographies, there is a moment, going back to your point, where effort and activity and consciousness is going in this direction. Okay? And all of a sudden something happens and the direction of activity, consciousness, and whatnot moves in another direction. Sometimes I say it's you're going with the stream, now you're going against the stream. You're reversing the previous path. This is that moment that happens to him. He's doing his mother, he's gathering firewood, he hears this one line, and the first thing he says, where is that from? Where did you get that? He's so excited and so turned on in some deep way that he is not of, I would say, almost suspended animation. It's like you can imagine all of a sudden everything stops. His world stops at that moment. And he goes up to this complete stranger and says, where did you get that? And this is the turning moment. And in most people's path of cultivation, sometimes this is very sudden like this. It happens. And sometimes it's a gradual. But when you feel it happening, it's almost like a powerful reverse flow of gravity that's starting to reorient you in a different way than you've been going before. And it has almost its own momentum. The only way you can stop it is by consciously denying it. But if you just soften and yield to it, it will start to reorient you as it does him. So let's read what happens. He says, after hearing this, and because of a karmic connection from the past, I was given 10 ounces of silver by another customer so I could provide for my elderly mother with food and clothing. And then he told me to go right to Hui Neng and bow to the Fifth Patriarch. So, read between the lines here. Something's happening at this inn. Somebody recites this line. He lights up with something that catches attention. It catches enough attention that somebody else says, I'm going to give this guy some money to go off and pursue what I see is, and there's a genuine sincerity that must have been going on. There must have been something quite revealing happens. You've seen this. You've seen encounters where there's something happens to somebody that's really sincere and spontaneous at the moment, and somebody else is so moved by that they will actually lend a hand to support it. Whether it's somebody who is playing a musical instrument and that person says, my God, you have the touch. I'm going to try to find some money to get you into music school or something. Or somebody shows a talent in medicine or somebody and somebody comes forth. I know people who do this, that have that kind of money. And one person I know saw a boy dancing on the streets of South Africa, and she was so moved, she just instantly went and talked to him and his mother and said, this guy's got talent, you should really let him pursue this, I'll pay for his schooling and whatnot, and she paid this whole way through schooling, and now he's dancing with some ballet company in Australia. You know, and so something is happening here along these lines at the spiritual level as you go and bow to the Fifth Patriarch. So he says, after making the necessary arrangements for my mother's welfare, I left right away and arrived at Hui Neng in 30 days. There I bowed to the Fifth Patriarch. So everything turns around. He takes care of whatever is needed for his mother. And again, you see in terms of something here, although he has now got the calling, if you will, and it's like there's nothing else between his eyebrows than to pursue this one thing, still, somewhere in his being is this regard for his mother who brought him into the world and who is the primary source in many ways for where he is right now, and his wish to make sure that she's attended to before he rushes off. So he doesn't just leave and put everything down. Okay? I tell you a story. Once in the early days, there was a monk who had somehow gotten a view, and we call this thirsty. It's a little bit of a wrong view. But the view was, I am addicted to my passions, desires, especially for sugar and milk and sweets. And this I associate with my mother. And therefore he knelt and he said, I am from this day forward going to renounce my mother and have nothing to do with her. And the master was listening, and so he circulated, he bowed really sincerely, and the master was like, what's he going to say? And he said, and then the master's face wrinkled up. He says, no, no, no. The problem is not your mother, it's your mind of desire. You wouldn't even be here kneeling if it weren't for your mother. Don't give up your mother, give up your desire. Boom. And it caused, I I think he had an awakening at the moment and realized it is not the object of desire that is the problem. It is the mind of desire that's the problem. A mind full of desire will turn a turd into something desirable, okay? A mind that's free of desire sees all things as just they are. There's no attraction. So this is mind-ground teaching again. Anyway. Okay, so here's our first encounter. So he goes in, bows to the fifth patriarch, who then asked me, this way, where are you from and what do you seek? I replied, your disciple is a commoner from Xin province in Lingnan, meaning I'm not from here, I'm from another region, and I come from afar to bow to you and seek only to be a Buddha, nothing else. Boom. Now, how many of you, when you came into the monastery, Hung Sure greets you at the door and said, why are you here? And you say, I'm just a commoner from Los Angeles, and I'm just here to be a Buddha, nothing else. Well, that class starts at 6. No, I mean, this is pretty remarkable. He's coming after 30 days. He hasn't been sleeping at, in the Claremont Hotel. He's been out on the road. He's rugged, he's dirty, he's from the South. He's either dark-skinned a little bit because he's been out in the weather so much, or there's some suspicion in the sense of that he may be from an area of where the skin color is darker than, say, Hanren. There's some debate about this, but in any event, he smells, he's dirty, he doesn't look like good material, because all the monks are walking around with their nice robes and shaved heads, and there's this dirty guy knocking on the door. And he says, so where are you from? And then he gives the wrong answer. He's from the South. Now, you have to remember at this time, in this mind of this monastery, the South is the backward area. Where I grew up in the north of the United States, it was similar. So if somebody came and said, hi, I'm from Mississippi, you go, oh, well, No, I don't mean to be derogatory. I'm just saying these biases exist, right? So he's from the South. And then he doesn't say, like, I've come here to learn, I've come here to study. He says, I want to be a Buddha. Wow. Okay. Now, the patriarch says, great, come on in. That's all we do here. We make Buddhas. No, he says, if you are from Lingnan, you must be a barbarian. That's polite. How could you become a Buddha? Okay. Now, you could say at this time, someone of fainter heart would say, and go, he's not going to take me. He's insulted me. He's picked on my inferiority. I know I'm a southerner. I'm a commoner. Of course. But he doesn't do that. He's got chutzpah. I replied, people may come from the north or come from the south, but fundamentally there is no north or south to the Buddha nature. Woo. The body of a barbarian and that of a high master, the appearances, are not the same. But what difference is there in our Buddha nature? Very interesting answer. So one, it shows his utmost sincerity, also shows that awakening he had was pretty profound, be able to come to this conclusion. But it also shows, you could say a kind of attitude, but it could also show a deep sincerity, almost a naivete, rather than, challenging, which is, I really want you to understand why I'm here. I may look like this, but I tell you, my heart's of gold, and I really want to do this. So you can read this a number of ways. I don't read it necessarily as confrontational or one-upsmanship. I read it as, no, I want you to really understand why I'm here. I'm not here for the superficial reasons. I know that you're teaching this text. I know this text will lead me to a profound understanding, and I don't have time to play around. Life is short. Okay? Now, we'll go to the next part of this exchange before we finish for the night. The fifth patriarch wished to continue the conversation. But, so the teacher is there, like everybody comes in and says, hi, I'm here to make offerings. Hi, I'd like to be a disciple. Hi, I'm, da-da-da. And he says, okay, go. And this guy comes, I want to be a Buddha. And so the teacher's going, wow, at last, somebody, who really wants to learn. And listen to that answer. That's really interesting. And he wanted to, but Noticing that his disciples were gathering all around, he told me to follow the group off to work. Now here's the first hint of something a little amiss in Eden. This is the Fifth Patriarch's way place. This is the way place of the Great Master. And yet, when the disciples gather around, he tells them to go away. Now, wouldn't he want to share the insights and brightness of this new disciple with all the other disciples so they'd see, oh my gosh, somebody's really superior has come in the door? No, there's something else going on. We'll see later. He's actually trying to protect him. Now, Hui Neng doesn't quite get it, I think. That's how I'm going to read this next part. He says, go off to work. And he says, Hui Neng wants to inform the High Master that wisdom is always active in this disciple's mind, and I never depart from my essential nature. This is the field of blessings. What work would the High Master have me do? So he's thinking the dialogue's continuing, right? So he says, you're a barbarian yourself. I can become a Buddha. And then he says, well, go off and do work. So he thinks, well, the next reply is, I'm always working on the mind ground. I am always there. What work would you have me do? But this is it's the right answer at the wrong time, right? So like the ones that are gathered around going, what is going on here?
He was getting the brush off, but he didn't take it that way.
Well, it was sort of, he was getting the brush off, but he was getting
A protective brush off.
getting off the line of fire,
Yeah.
right? But he was so excited and sincere, he probably didn't notice the others gathering. He just saw this Fifth Patriarch, and he says, oh, that's another question, isn't it? Well, I'll show you that I'm really sincere. I'm doing the work all the time. I'm attending to this all moments. So what work would you have me do, like metaphor? And he's saying, no, go to work, get out of here. So he says, the Fifth Patriarch then says, what a barbarian. You are very sharp. Say no more. Go to the granary shed in the back and get to work. Now, this is like, okay, here's the cold water. It's like, oh, Chan dialogue over, right? He suddenly is getting splashed and he realizes, okay. So I withdrew to a back building where a laborer put me to work splitting firewood and threshing rice on the hulling pestle. So the exchange happens. The master scolds him, even though it's not really what he's feeling. He's feeling this is real talent here that I'd like to work with, but these other disciples gathering has created something about a scene, and we'll see later while this manifests. The hulling pestle is actually like a device. If you know, sometimes you see these oil derricks that go up and down, these little. So there's a hulling pestle as you work on. It's like an exercise bike in a sense, and the pestle goes up and down as you go up and down. And so as you come down on it, the up, you stand on, the pestle comes down, so it's crushing the rice. That's why later you'll see there's a section if you put a rock on his waist. And you're thinking, well, why would he do that? Because then it gives him more to work that pestle machine, because it comes down with greater force, he can do it. So that's where we'll stop tonight in the encounter where he goes to work.
Marty, is he also is this for humorous effect with the audience here, that he's telling the story this way? Is the audience laughing at this point? Like, oh yeah, the master humbled himself, or the master was himself humbled and sent off to work.
I don't think it's that case. I think he's explaining a sincere encounter. I think the audience would be cued into the High Master is protecting him from danger, and that he's being naive and innocent and not recognizing what's going on, and he would have no way of knowing. Because he's so sincere and innocent, he couldn't imagine there would be people around the High Master for other reasons than what he's there for. I mean, this is both sincerity and you could call it naivete, but it's from this kind of naivete that Buddhas and Bodhisattvas come. They don't come from manipulating, calculating minds. So his mind is so childlike that he would not occur to him at this holy place. There could be people vying and fighting for power and for fame, and especially for the next position of patriarch. That would be, to him, inconceivable at this moment. So in a sense, he's so sincere and so open that he doesn't see what's going on. So I don't think they'd be laughing. They'd almost feel a kind of empathy or pity, and then gratitude that the Fifth Patriarch stopped in time before he put his neck way out too far, and the fifth patriarch would have to say, wow, you're the one. That would be, he wouldn't even make it to the back kitchen in this setting, because we'll see later, after in fact he does get his confirmation, the master then tells him, get out of here quick, because your life's in danger now.
I mean, I kind of see what people seem to be calling today a humble brag a bit in this. It's like I was so naive. I was just focused on the way, and therefore I wasn't picking up on all this politics.
There could be at this moment a little bit of both. There's a way to read it like his first answer was pretty good. He was sort of on a roll, and so he could go with the second one here. Mm-hmm. And if nobody else had been there, it'd be a different text. It could have been, and then the fifth patriarch said, and then he said, and finally it was like, gah. His foot was in his mouth at that point. Because he hasn't really fully achieved the way yet. And so he's early, he's advanced, he's ripe, and he has some initial insights here. But he's still not smelted. So there is going to be, or why would he come? See, this is the point. He knows he needs to come to learn more. If nothing else, to confirm his initial awakening, but to see if there's not more to it than just that initial insight he had. So he is a student, so he has to be brought down to, but he can't bring him down on this next exchange. Now you'll see later, this is an interesting point, in the other lively encounters where there isn't any tension, the exchanges go on. And it's sort of like nobody interrupts, and it's sort of like, so the next exchange would be, well, if you're working all the time, do you know that you're working? Because if you know you're working, you're not really working. And then it would go, that happens later, but in this exchange, that doesn't happen yet. Immediately he steps in to protect him. Okay, so we'll stop here tonight. We're kind of out of time, so do you want me to save the poem for next week? No. You all want to hear a little bit of the poem? Okay, I'll read you a little bit of this poem. The reason I'm reading this little poem, it has to do with the idea of purity. In other words, what does purity mean? He says, your essential nature, the purity of your essential nature is just bodhi. And purity has two meanings in this. One, purity means the absence of klesha, or translated as defilements. And we'll go into this later. We talked about it, greed, anger, misunderstanding, profound misunderstanding, paralyzing skepticism, which is doubt, arrogance, scatteredness, and so on and so forth. There's a list of negative human emotions and states that obstruct the arisal of our natural bodhi. So purity then is the absence of those. The absence, and that's why they're sometimes called defilements, sometimes they're called chains, yokes, fetters, raging stream, arrows, and so forth, dust and pollution. And pollution's in the contemporary world, to say, in this space of my consciousness, I've allowed a pollution to arise. And so the absence of that is purity. But the purity is presented as innate and whole and complete, not something that's to be gotten, but something that's there only to be rediscovered through the removal of the klesha. But also purity means here, because he says if your essential nature is whole and pure, it means it's unalloyed pure, with no admixture. It means whole and complete, lacking nothing. These are two meanings of it. It's an important meaning to understand. It doesn't just mean the defilements are gone, but it means essentially at the ground of your being, there's nothing to add and nothing to subtract. You are whole and complete. This is a very profound view of human nature. And so the purity that's essential is proposing, and he says this upon his awakening, how unexpected, nothing's lacking in this. So that's why he can say, don't seek outside, because it's already whole and complete. This is really important. So here's the poem. This is written, this nun is about early 1600s, China. Her name is Xingche. Her background a little bit is she came from a fairly well-to-do family, so she did have some education. A marriage was arranged that she wasn't happy with, but like a lot of people get married, it's not totally happy, either at the beginning, as it advances, or towards the end, or all three. But in any event, being in that position, she was more or less promised and betrothed and went along with the plan and married and quickly had a number of children. And again, from our other poetry, you can see none of this was really what she wished for. She did not wish to marry, and she did not wish to have children. Nonetheless, she found herself in that situation. Then her husband on a trip dies. And at that moment, she has a choice to become a widow, to remarry, and she chooses to go off and cultivate the way. And so she just leaves and goes off. She finds a master to study with in a place called, and the place is called Mount Hung, also known as Nanyue, a southern peak. And there's a famous master there called Shanxi. Unfortunately, Shanxi teaches her only for a few years, and he dies from eating poisonous greens during a war. So there was a war going on. There's a lot of wars going on. These marauding troops come through, and they rape and pillage and steal everything. And so people are reduced to really bad circumstances. He goes out to gather some greens and gathers the wrong ones and dies. It's easier than you think to gather. I did that once. Almost killed Hung Sure and I. Story. So he eats the wrong, he dies. Then she leaves this mountain, although she loves it because there's nothing there. She goes and wanders, meets other teachers, has some profound realizations, then becomes an abbess and takes on many disciples and teaches for many years. And then towards the end of her life, just says goodbye again and goes back to this mountain where she retires. And we assume die because there's no record after her return to the mountain what happens. And later, some of her disciples compiled some of her poetry. I'm going to only read half of this poem tonight to you because it's quite long. And the reason I chose this one is because towards the end of this, there's a description of purity that matches what we were just talking about. So this poem is called Living Alone on the Mountain. And she's now describing, I guess this is probably towards the end or at the beginning encounter. From the mountain stream, the wind gusts fiercely. When the heart is empty, when the nature is empty, each and everything is still. There's no noise here of clattering carts and horses. It is far from both neighbors and dustily worldly cares. The leaves fall as if autumn had grown old. The trees are bared, revealing the waterfall. I've abandoned all ambition. Now seagull and egret are as close to me as the most intimate of friends. The gate borrows stray clouds to guard it, and a pure solitude borders my quarters. Forest gibbons go in search of ripe fruit, roosting birds fly deep into the forest. I've thrown off the net of floating fame and aimed higher with a mind that delights in the way. The emptiness of emptiness beyond four phrases, the fulfillment as rare as finding a needle in a haystack. And here's the last sort of quatrain I'll read. When the sun comes out, it warms my body through, and when the wind rises, it cools off the great earth. The human heart must face so many obstacles, and the only way of the sages, and only the way of the sages can scatter and dispel. Like white jade, from the beginning, it is completely white. Like yellow gold, it needs no refining to become yellow. Whether ancient or modern, it undergoes no change, and in each and every place reveals the eternally true or real. So I'll stop. That's halfway her poem, but the last line I wanted to repeat again. The idea of purity is not something that you attain, but is natural and whole. It's these lines. Like white jade, from the very beginning is completely white. And like yellow gold, it needs no refining to become yellow. In other words, there's nothing in excess and nothing lacking. This is the nature, pure, intrinsic as it is. And then I love this line, whether ancient or modern. Whether ancient or modern, again, the non-time discrimination, it stays ever thus. And that means, just as the Sixth Patriarch is addressing his assembly and saying, you all right now have this, and the same applies for us right now as we hear it. We're in the same position as those who are attending. So I could go through some of this more and take it apart, but I just wanted to give you a flavor of the poetry side of this school of thought. And then if you like poetry like I do, then every week or so I'll bring in little poems to read, mostly by this nuns collection I just discovered. I know we read Hanshan's poems, and everybody knows those, but these are less discovered, but I think equally as poignant. So, okay, question.
Do we have any idea of what ambition and fame she had in mind? It's kind of hard to imagine a woman in 1600s China having her eye on some great fame.
She might say, ancient and modern, the quest for fame is the same. Maybe the objects of fame different. For example, maybe the marriage was presented as a famous moving up of the family. Maybe the children were the investment of name and fame, because unlike today, a lot of parents then felt their children would make them, glorious and happy and whatnot, and they tried to get them into the best schools and be successful and make a lot of money. That was ancient. Modern is like, you want to cultivate? Go ahead, we're happy. Ha ha, I'm joking. Okay, so it might be the children, or anybody else want to guess another possibility?
Disciples, lots of disciples.
Even in the spiritual path, having lots of disciples or having reputation. Because we see that she leaves. She teaches and then she leaves all her disciples, leaves the famous temple that she was given, and goes back to the mountain. And so it could be fame in the spiritual. Again, only ancient, not modern. Right. And maybe even referring to a more subtle level of fame at one's own cultivation. So what she's saying, I put to rest, was not only the disciples, not only the family, not only worldly stuff, but even this quiet inner wish for accomplishment. And so that's why sometimes they express that I've accomplished wanting nothing to accomplish and things like that. So fame is very subtle, how it can manifest. Okay, good questions.
I have 2 questions from online.
Online, who's that? A new student?
So Angela just asked what was the name of the nun?
Oh, the nun's name was Xing, like practice, and then Che. What's that, Che? Che. Through. Cultivating through. Penetrating. Good. Good name. Xing Che. Got it. That's her name.
Then there was a question from last week.
Do I want to hear it?
You promise it. You have to answer it.
Okay, I have to answer it. The class will entertain it.
So the question is meditation a process of emptying the seeds in the 8th consciousness so we can find our true nature?
So the question is the process of emptying the seeds in the 8th consciousness so we can find our true nature.
Yes or no?
Yes or no? Yes and no. The short answer. The Sixth Patriarch would say that indeed is what he would call the gradual or provisional teaching. The direct teaching says no. Basically, there's no seeds and there's no 8th consciousness. Basically, there's not one thing where can dust alight. So, depending on how you frame his particular teaching, even the creation of consciousness is a structure by which we describe something that is not limited by even those words and terms. So I'm not being evasive here. I'm trying to express it through his teaching. He would say, yes, Shensho's verse says, time and again, sweep it clean. Get the seeds out. Let no dust alight. The Sixth Patriarch says, basically, there's not even that. So why are you sweeping? If you're sweeping, it's already too late. But we'll get to that later. But yeah, good questions. Okay, we'll do any announcements. Okay, you have nothing going on here?
Same classes, nothing going on.
Nothing going on.
Same
Wu
classes.
wei. Wu wei si. Okay, we'll do the transference in English.
May every living being,
Our minds as one most luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may their minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Bow in respect to the three jewels.